It is my distinct honor and pleasure to ask you to rise and give a warm welcome to our guest speaker, Professor Dan Ariely, who will speak on the theme, Unraveling the Mysteries of Human Behavior.
Great. So, thanks for showing up. Before we start, you might have noticed I have half a beard. You might have wondered what bet I lost. So I didn't lose a bet. I was badly burned many years ago. Most of my body is covered with scars, including the right side of my face. It just so happened that the scars are kind of sort of symmetrical, but I didn't plan that, and I'm not proposing a half beard. I'm not promoting them. Okay, so my name is Dan Ariely. I have kind of three professional lives. I have a research lab at Duke called the Center for Advanced Hindsight, and we study mostly how people make financial decisions and health, mostly in the US, a little bit in the rest of the world, mostly in Africa. A second life I have is I have a group in Israel working only with the Israeli government, trying to change policy to be behaviorally informed. For example, a couple of months ago we changed how food is labeled in Israel. Right now we're using we changed this, in the US you have like there's a lot of reading on the side of the boxes, and nobody reads that, and it doesn't change behavior. We moved to a system of big red circle, bad food, big green circle, good food. In the middle there's a lot of stuff we don't do it. We studied it thoroughly. We showed that it was a better approach, and January 1st it was implemented, and so far it looks very good, but we'll see what happens. So we're a group of people that study how to do policy informed by what people actually do, and then we try to get the government to do that. And anyway, lots of things to say about the Israeli government. And then I have a third life, which is from time to time I have ideas that I like and nobody else likes, and then I do a startup to try and push that idea out, and maybe I'll tell you about a couple of those. Okay, but it's all about changing behavior. So let's talk a little bit about changing behavior. And when we try to think about the state of the world, it's very clear that the state of the world is not where we would have liked it to be. There's a big gap. And the question is, how can we narrow that gap? What are people doing right now that we wish people would act differently? And it's always easy to talk about other people, but we can also introspect and think about ourselves a little bit. So for example, how many people in this room in the last month have eaten more than you think you should? Just kind of a general census. How many of you in the last month have exercised less than you think you should? Okay. How many of you in the last month have not slept enough? How many of you in the last month have at least once texted while driving? Okay. How many of you in the last month have not always washed your hands when you went to the bathroom? I do research on dishonesty. I'll ask you last question. How many of you have ever, not last month, but have ever had unplanned, unprotected sex? Amazing. Good. So if you think about all of those behaviors, texting and driving, not washing our hands, it's clear there's a big gap between what we know is the right thing and what we actually do. The question is, how do we bridge those? And when we think about how do we bridge that, our intuitive answer is to give people information. Right? If people don't do the right thing, let's just give people more information. For example, if people smoke, they just must not know that it's dangerous to their health. Let's tell them that it's dangerous. Let's give them pamphlets that say that it's dangerous, and if people only knew, they would stop immediately. Or if people text and drive, let's tell them that it's dangerous. Or let's give them fines. By the way, in the US, there are states that have fines for texting and driving and have states that don't have fines. You know what happens in states that introduced fines? Accident rate went up, down, or didn't change? went up. Why? Because instead of texting over the wheel, people started texting under the wheel. Right? If you look for evidence that there's no limit to human stupidity, that's exactly. Oh, it's dangerous. Let me make it more dangerous by. The real punishment, by the way, for texting and driving is dying and killing other people. The $1,000 fine is a small issue. So we usually think that it's about giving people information. If we just gave people information, they would make the right decision, but there's actually no evidence for this. It's not true for smoking, it's not true for texting and driving, it's not true for all kinds of things. So that's the bad news. By the way, another place where it's wrong is in the area of what's called financial literacy. You know, there's a lot of attempts to teach people how to deal with money. In the US, we spend between $700 and $800 million a year on financial literacy, different courses, classes, teach people how to deal with money. And the first question is, do people remember? And the answer is yes. Not everything, but they remember some of it. Great news. But do people act differently? And here the answer is no. If you look at saving, budgeting, planning, saving, all of those things, and you say, how much improvement do we get for $700 to $800 million investment? The improvement is 0.1%. Not zero, but as humanly close to zero as possible. And so basically, we spend a lot of money on teaching people the right thing to do, but then we also arm people with credit cards. And you know something in your mind, but you have a credit card. Which one wins? Right? The credit card wins. So the sad news of today is that we usually go to let's give people more information as a methodology for improving behavior. The answer is that just doesn't work. What does work? What works is to change the environment. And the idea is that if we all want to change how we behave and how other people behave, the key is not to change the person, the key is to change the environment. And by the way, we can talk about whether religion is a way to change the person or to change the environment. I think it's much more about changing the environment. And we have a very simple model to think about how to do this. And we think about changing human behavior is like sending a rocket to space. And when you send a rocket to space, you have two main tasks. The first one is friction. How do you make the rocket as aerodynamic as possible so it has the least amount of resistance? And then the second part is how do you add more fuel to the rocket? And the same thing is true for human behavior. We think about, is the easy behavior and the right behavior aligned? And if they're not, it's extra friction. And then we say, and how do we add motivation to them? Friction and motivation, that's the two steps that we take. And let's walk through some examples. So example number one, this is an experiment we did with a company called Express Script. Express Script is a PBM. They manage pharmaceutical benefits. If some of you get your medication in the mail, you might be getting it from Express Script. And what basically happened is that you go to your doctor. Your doctor tells you you have a long-term illness, and you sign up to get your medication from Express Script. And you get your medication in the mail every 90 days. Every 90 days, medication. Great. But now, Express Script wants to switch people from getting branded medication to generic medication. Right? So they send people a letter. And they say, please, 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 switch to generics. You will save money, we will save money, your employer will save money, the world will be a better place. And what do you think people do? Nothing. At best, they recycle. So they try, nothing happens. So then, for 1 year, they go all out. They write people a letter, and they say, usually your medication, your branded medication is, let's say, $25. And usually the generic is $5. If you'll switch now, it will be free for a whole year. Free for a whole year. Amazing deal, right? Can't get better than that. What percentage of people do you think switched?
10.
Slightly less than 10. Slightly less than 10, and they were very unhappy at that point. They expected more, and at that point they called me up to complain. Why did they call up to complain to me? I wrote a couple of papers on the allure of free. In those papers, I show that if you reduce the price from, let's say, 10 cents to 1 cent, demand goes up a little bit. But you change the price from 1 cent to 0, now people get excited. right? You've all stood in line for way too long for a free ice cream or something, right? Nobody would stand for half an hour in a line to get $1.25. But it's a free ice cream, now we stand in line for a long time. So we show that people are really excited about free, and they tried free, and they said, look, we tried free, you said free, but it's not what we were hoping for. Like 10% is just not, we were hoping for more. And I said, maybe people don't like generic medication, that's a possibility, but maybe it's about the friction. So they said, what do you mean? I said, let's look at the little details of your design, and let's look at the friction. In your design, people started with branded medication because that's what their physician prescribed to them. And they could do nothing and end with branded. If they switch to generic, they have to prefer generic to branded, but they have to also take an action compared to no action. And this is what we call a confounded design. Two things are happening at the same time. It's branded and doing nothing. It's generic and returning a letter. So you don't know if people love branded or love doing nothing. If people hate generic or people hate returning letters, right? Which one is it? Now, letter doesn't look like a big deal, but maybe it has some role to play. So imagine it was you, and I said, how would you design an experiment to separate people's loves of branded from love of doing nothing? How would you propose?
Make generic the preferred and make you have to request the right.
Okay, so you could say, let's change what physicians do from the beginning. But you know, drug companies hire very attractive people as drug reps, and they go to physicians often. Not so attractive, you're saying? No, but you know, drug companies do a lot of effort to get physicians to prescribe branded medication. So what can we do at our level? So the first proposal was to say, let's switch it. Let's write people a letter and say, next time we're switching you to generics. You don't need to do anything. It will show up automatically. If you want to stay with branded, please return the letter. Switch the default. What do you think happened? Lawyers happened. It turns out it's illegal. It's illegal to switch medication like this. And by the way, for brainstorming, illegal, immoral proposals are okay, as long as you don't do it. But for brainstorming, and the reason it's a good idea to brainstorm, because this is the purity of the idea, right? We would have loved to do it if we could, to understand human nature. Now it's illegal. What can we do? We talked to the lawyers, and they allowed us to do a T intersection. What's a T intersection? We send people a letter, and we say, if you don't return this letter, we will be forced to stop your medication. But when you return this letter, you can choose branded at 25 or whatever it is, generic at 5. There's no free anymore. You see, in the original design, branded had the no action benefit. In the illegal, immoral design, generic had the no action benefit. Now it's an equal footing. You have to return the letter. And indeed, for more than 10,000 people, only 2 people did not return the letter, right? It was just too costly not to return the letter. What percentage of people do you think switched? Between 80 and 90%. So what does it say? Do people like branded or like generics? It means people don't like returning letters. Now, when Express Script were thinking about it, they were thinking about the real decision, branded versus generic. But the reality is that on the day-to-day basis, it wasn't generic versus branded. It was, do I want to deal with this or not? And you can ask yourself, who are those people? Who are those people that don't return the letter if it could save them $20 a month for the rest of their life? Who are they? Well, again, think about yourself. How many of you have a subscription to something you should be canceling? Some TV station, some app, something. And if you don't think you have one of those, just check your credit card statement. You'll discover a credit bureau. I mean, there's lots of things you're probably paying for and you have no idea. And it's not that we say we don't want to cancel, we just say we don't want to cancel tonight. But then tonight and tonight. So the first point is friction, and the reason I'm emphasizing this is that even a letter, which seems like a small deal, is a lot of friction, and it gets us to act in different ways. Another example. How many of you probably have right now rottening fruits and vegetables in your refrigerators at home? Yeah. Why? It's just a bad design. The people who designed the refrigerator, they put the drawer at the bottom and they made it opaque. And it's good for temperature and it's good for humidity. But it's not good for human nature. Because we open the refrigerator door and we look where? At eye level. We could bend. It's a possibility. It's not that far, but it's a little too far. So we don't bend and we don't open the drawer. We do it about 20% of the time. We end up looking at eye level. If we just replaced and put at eye level the healthy stuff and the unhealthy stuff all the way down there at the drawer, things would get better. Okay, so point number one, friction. Point number two is about motivation, right? So once we eliminate all the frictions we need, sometimes we don't have enough reasons to do the things we want people to do for the long term. Can we add more motivation? And here I'll give you a couple of examples. This example is from a study we did in Israel. The Israeli government asked us to figure out a way to get more girls to study computer science. They wanted more boys to study computer science, but mostly they wanted more girls to study computer science. And, you know, there's all these computer science light classes. Like you do 6 weeks of computer science and between middle school and high school, and the hope is that in high school, more kids would study the kind of things that could make them programmers or computer scientists down the line. And there's many of those courses. Google does it, and Facebook does it, and Wix does it, and the Israeli government does it. There's lots of these 6 weeks computer science. And they said, look, these classes get more kids to study computer science, but they're expensive. They're expensive, they're complex. Could you help us digitize them? And if they would be digitized, maybe we could push them to more people. So we said, fine, but the scientist in me said, but first let's test if they work, right? So what do you think? Do they work? Do these classes change the likelihood that kids would study computer science? No. So they make no difference for boys, before and after, and they make it less likely for girls to study computer science. By the way, these things that people have been doing for a long time, all with good intentions, are making things worse. Now, it's very strange results, right? Why would a 6 weeks computer science light class get people to be less likely to do it? So we didn't trust the results fully, so we tried it again. Same result again. So now, like detectives, we're trying to figure out what's going on. So what do you think? Why is it? It's hard, yeah?
It's oftentimes those classes are in the summertime when the kids have better things to do.
Yeah, but so you could say they're in summertime, but why do they make it worse for girls?
Specifically for computer science, there's a big learning curve. So you don't know anything, and all of a sudden you know something. Maybe it's too short of a class.
Maybe it's too short of a class?
Maybe the girls, they like the nerdy boys that were in the class.
Uh-huh.
Something to do with the athletic.
So we can go and we can speculate. I'll tell you what the results showed. Yep. So the first thing we asked was, what do the girls think about their ability to do it, right? What's their competence, or what's called sometimes self-efficacy? What do you think? Increases. They say, yes, I can do it, just like the boys. But what also happened is they say, this is unbelievably boring, I can't see myself working in this line of work. Because what happened in the first 6 weeks of computer science light, you learn how to move a turtle on the screen. And at the end of these 6 weeks, the boy said, oh my goodness, you can get paid for this. That's great. And the girl said, who would ever want to do this as a career? So what we found out is the girls at that age are looking for something that has meaning. And they want to find out that this is a path to do something that they would actually want to do later on. The boys are focusing on moving the turtle on the screen. They are not really thinking that much to the future. The girls are thinking about what they want to do in the future. So we ran around and we filmed young people, mostly young women, that are doing computer science and design, computer science and health, computer science and something else. And we passed almost 100,000 students through our system when they were choosing what they were going to study for high school. And we basically forced them to see these videos that gave a sense of meaning and to what computer science is all about. And we increased the number of girls by 22% who were studying things in high school that could qualify them to be computer scientists. We also increased the boys, but by much less, because that intervention was mostly designed for the girls. Give you another example. And the thing about this is you're really trying to figure out what motivation you need to add to the equation. Think that you have people and you ask yourself, are they motivated enough? The answer is no. What do you want to add? In our case, we figured that meaning was really missing, so we said, how do we add that component? Another example I'll give you is, this is a study we did in Kibera. Kibera is a slum in Kenya. We were trying to get very, very poor people to save a little bit of money for a rainy day. What happened is, if you're very, very poor and you live hand to mouth and you have no extra, from time to time bad things happen. In the US, the bottom half of Americans have unexpected expenses that they can't afford about 2.5 times a year. Right? In Kenya, it happens more. They have unexpected expenses. The roof is leaking, somebody is sick. And then what can you do? You have two options. If you have some tools or a bucket or a frying pan or something, you can sell them, or you borrow. And if you borrow at Kibera, it could be up to 10% a week interest rate, right? It's not banks, it's money, loan sharks. And then if you either sell what you have or you borrow at that high interest rate, things just get worse. So we want to have people have some rainy day funds. So the first thing we want to deal with is friction. So we teamed up with M-Pesa. M-Pesa is the Kenyan payment company. About 20% in Kenya of the people in Kenya have bank accounts. About 90% have M-Pesa accounts. It's like a bank account on your phone. It's not really a bank account. It's a wallet on your phone. It works on any phone. And we teamed up with an investment bank. And we created a system where people could put money into their M-Pesa account, but every night the money moved to the investment bank. And the reason this was a good system is that now they couldn't take it back through M-Pesa. It was just one way. So if they want to take the money back, they had to take a bus, go to the city during work hours, fill a form, wait an hour, get the money, come back. It could take 4 or 5 hours. And we wanted that because friction is not always our enemy. We just want to align friction with what we want. In this case, we want easy in, hard out. Because if it was easy in and easy out, what would happen? They would put in, they would take it out. So easy in, hard out. So we gave that system to lots and lots of people. And then we added motivation to it. And again, let me ask you, if you were going to add motivation, wanting to get people to save more, what kind of things would you add? Interest rate. Perfect. What else?
Have the government give them a bonus?
Yes.
Safe?
So there's lots of ways to give money away, right?
Yes.
Interest, bonus, outside of money. What else?
Specific goals.
Toaster.
Give them goals.
Gifts.
Gifts. Stuff, yeah. Very good. What else? Recognition.
Penalties if they don't.
Trying to be nice people here. Penalties, okay. No, you're right. Okay, so I'll tell you what we tried. First group, control condition. Easy in, hard out, nothing else. No fuel, just friction. We just dealt with the friction. Group number 2, we reminded them. Every Friday, we send them a text message that said, try and save 100 shillings, about $1 this week. Just so you get a sense, these people live on about $10 a week, right? So that's about 10% of their income. Just a reminder, try and save 10 shillings. Another group, we send them the same text message, but we pretended it came from their kids. So it says, hi ma'am, hi mom, hi dad, this is little Yossi, or whatever the name of the kid was. It was never Yossi. Try and save 100 shillings this week for the future of our family. A little bit of guilt, thinking long term. Another group got a 10% match. save up to 100 shillings, we'll give you 10%. Another group got a 20% match. Up to 100 shillings, we'll give you 20%. Two other groups also got 10% and 20%, but they got it with loss aversion. What's loss aversion? Loss aversion is the principle that we hate losing more than we enjoy gaining. Right? If you gain $1,000 today, you would be happy. If you lost $1,000, you'll be really miserable and for much longer. Now, we can't take money away from those poor people. Who made this suggestion? It's the guy on the text right now. But we can't take away money from these people. They're poor enough as it is. But we do want to give them the sense of loss. So what did we do? We do what we call pre-match. What's pre-match? We gave them the full match in the beginning of the week. Let's say 10 shillings. And here's the 10 shilling. It's waiting for you. And if somebody put 40, we said, oh, you put 40. We're leaving 4 in and we take 6 out. So you see in the regular match, somebody puts 40, they get 4 more. They say, thank you. In the pre-match, they get 10. They realize that they should maybe try and get all of it to keep it. And then if they put 40, they see the money leaving their account. By the way, it's kind of amazing to work in the third world and realize you can take money out of people's accounts. Like it's in the US, you couldn't unless you're the government. You can't. So we had text from kids, 10%, 20% beginning of the week, end of the week, and then we had a condition with a coin about this size with 24 numbers written on it. And we said, please put the coin somewhere in your hut, and every week take a knife and scratch the number for that week. Week 1, 2, 3, 4. Scratch it like a minus if you didn't save. Scratch it up and down if you saved. Now think about all of those methods. Which one do you think created the highest level of savings?
When you took the money out of their account.
So I'll read each of them and please vote and we'll see what the majority thinks. How many people think that the regular text worked the best? Nobody. Good. It didn't work the best. It worked, but not the best. How many people think the text from the kids worked the best? Okay, it's always interesting to keep your hands up, to see the ages of the people who still have hope that kids are. How many people think that 10% at the end of the week worked the best? 20% at the end of the week? Few. 10% in the beginning of the week with loss aversion? 20% beginning of the week? Oh, you vote twice. How many people think the coin worked the best? Okay. So I'll tell you what happened. We gave the system to people and people started saving, which is amazing, right? Because what was the benefit of the basic system? The only benefit was that it's impossible for you to take the money. It's hard for you to take the money when you want it. But some of the poorest people in the world wanted a system that its only benefit is it would be hard for them to take the money out when they want to. It's amazing. As a side story, I'll tell you that when we got these results, we call these sophisticated. So what we call naivete is somebody who said, I'll go to a restaurant, and they'll show me the cheesecake, and I'll say, no, thank you. It's somebody who thinks they'll be able to control temptation when in fact they can't. As sophisticated is somebody who comes in and says to the waiter, don't show me the dessert tray. Right? And this is what happened in the control. In the basic condition, people wanted a system that will force them to behave better, even though it had a cost to it. It's hard to get the money back. So with that, we created another saving mechanism for health expenses. Imagine you're very poor, you wake up in the morning, you have some illness. If you go to your doctor, you're not sure the doctor will help you. And if you don't go, you might get healed anyway, right? There's a possibility it will just go away. But you know, if you go to the doctor, there'll be a cost. And then you have to choose, do I pay the doctor and not have money for food later on? So we created a system where people could put money in to an account and only approved health clinics could draw from that. Right? And it's kind of they don't have health insurance, right? So they basically put the money and then it's there to pay for health expenses. And the idea was that now you wake up in the morning, you feel sick, and you say, I'm not sure the doctor will cure me, but I have this money that I have no other use for it. So let me go to the clinic. So we started this about 3 years ago. We already have almost 5 million people in this plan, which suggests that there is a real demand for mechanisms that help us with self-control and temptation. But anyway, back to our experiment. We said we created a basic condition. People wanted it. Text once a week helped a lot. This wasn't the best, but helped a lot. People forget, 6 months. The program ran for 6 months. 10% at the end of the week helped some more. 20% at the end of the week, just like 10%. No difference. 10% in the beginning of the week helps some more. 20% beginning of the week, just like 10%. No difference. And the text message from the kids was just like 20% in the beginning of the week, which is amazing. It's amazing what motivation kids give to their parents. And from this perspective, of course, we don't use kids enough. So, but the big surprise of the study was the coin. The coin basically doubled savings compared to everything else. And the question is why? What was it about the coin? And I'll tell you how I thought about the coin. So, when we do experiments on drinking coffee, we don't need to go anywhere, right? We've all had enough coffee, we understand the process. But when you do research on some of the poorest places in the world, it's good to go and visit and try to understand what's going on, what are the forces that play around. So there's a particular week that I'm in South Africa, and I'm in a very big town called Soweto that has a very big slum. I know there's one person from South Africa. There's more? Yeah. Oh, the big group. Very good. So that week I'm spending in Soweto, and on that particular day I sit in a place that sells funeral insurance. So the people from South Africa knows it. South Africa, for the Africans, they spend a lot of money on funerals. It's basically between 1 to 2 years of income they spend on funerals. In the US, people spend crazy amount on weddings. In South Africa, it's funerals. That's people's biggest celebration of their lifetime. Weddings are modest, funerals, that's a lot expensive. And by the way, it's more rational, right? Because when it comes to a funeral, you'll only have one. Anyway, I sit in this place that sells funeral insurance, and the father comes with his son, and for a father to take his son, these kids in the slums work all the time. They go and bring water, they do all kinds of things. There's lots of work to be done, but he brings his son, and he buys funeral insurance for a week. Just to be clear what it means, it will cover 90% of his funeral cost only if he dies in the next 7 days. Right? These are very poor people. They sell funeral insurance for a week or for a month. There's nothing longer in that place. Right? He just happened to make some money today. He has a little bit of money. He buys funeral insurance for a week. He gets the certificate, and in a very ceremonious way, he gives it to his son. And as he gives it to his son, I think to myself, why the ceremony? Why bring his kid not to do work and to come with him, and why the ceremony? Now think about the very poor father who just happened to make some money today. And now he's going to put some of it in savings or in insurance. What will the family see tonight? They'll see less. Right? There'll be less food, less water, less kerosene, less something on the table. At that level of poverty, the trade-off is very clear. It's either today or tomorrow. Right? That's what happened. So what his father was doing was to tell his son, yes, there's going to be less food, but there's another economic activity. I've been taking care of you in another way. And our coin was supposed to mimic, that was the idea of the coin. The coin was, we asked them to put it in their hut, some were visible. In Kibera, people don't visit each other's huts. These are miserable places. But the family could see it. And the idea was that there's a record to the family about, here we are, there's another economic activity that is not visible, like food on the table. Okay, so one comment I want to make is I told you about this simple model for behavioral change, friction and fuel. Friction is easy. Why? Because we look at the system and we say, what's extra here? What can we take off? Fuel is more difficult. Adding motivation is more complex because human motivation is amazing. And when we started, we didn't know in advance would it be helpful to do kids, text, 10%, 20%, loss aversion, the saliency of the coins, making something invisible visible? We didn't know what would be best. But that's why for friction, a lot of time you could just solve the problem without doing a lot of experiments. For motivation, you have to do some experiments. We don't always know what will create the highest motivation. But I want to go back and talk a little bit about this idea of making the invisible visible. So, 2,000 years ago, people basically saved in goats, right? Goats, chickens. And what's the good thing about saving in goats? Is we can come home from the office and we can see how many goats the neighbor has. And we could compete on who has more goats. We could compete on who has more savings. Then we invented money, and then we invented digital money, and all of a sudden we took this activity called insurance and saving and made it invisible. And we took this other activity called spending, also very important, made it extra visible. Just think about it. How many of you know something about what your neighbors are saving? Or what their insurance is? And on the other hand, how many of you know something about what your neighbors are spending? Much more, right? There's a tremendous asymmetry. And if there's tremendous asymmetry, how can we pay attention to things that are invisible? There was a very sad study that showed that when people win the lottery, their neighbors start spending more money. And in fact, they spend so much money that some of them go bankrupt. Right? And I know you say, oh, the crazy Americans. No, these were Canadians. Okay, so now that we have this idea that making something salient is important, we can ask the question of what else can we do with it. So imagine the following experiment. You take kids on the day that they are born and you divide them randomly into two groups, Group 1 and Group 2. And Group 1, you open college savings accounts for. Not their parents, you. The government, local government, opens college savings accounts for them, and we put $500 in these college savings accounts. Group 2, nothing happens. And then you let them go, and then you go and visit those kids on their 4th birthday. And what do you think? Is there difference in terms of social cognitive skills between the kids who have college savings accounts with $500 and the ones who don't? There is. Why? How come?
Because there's an expectation that you can achieve college.
Because do the kids know that they have college savings accounts?
The parents do.
The parents know, exactly. So once in a while the parents get a statement that says this little kid, while still in diaper, already has a college savings account. And what happened? Not big steps. But they buy them a few more books, they read a few more things to them, small steps, because it's salient all of a sudden. Now, if you're a parent and you think about your kids all the time as going to college, it wouldn't matter. But if you don't think all the time of them as going to college, and that would change what you focus on, how you think about your kids, even for a short time, it could make a difference. So with this data, in 2017, we convinced the Israeli government to start a college savings account for each kid on the day that they are born. And when we started this, the very nice people from the Ministry of Finance say, why the hassle? Every child should have a college savings account. Let's just discount universities. Not the same thing. And now we're in debate with them about when to send people the statement. So you can check it online, of course, but we want a couple, once or twice a year, to send it to people as a paper statement. People from the finance world want to send it when? The end of the year. It makes sense to them. And like early January. People like us that want behavioral change want to send it when? 2 weeks before each semester. Why? Because for them it's a backward tool. Here's how much you accumulated so far. For us it's a forward planning tool. The semester is coming. Let's get prepared in a better way. I'll tell you one more experiment on fuel. In Israel, there's the biggest HMO is called Kupat Cholim, Klalit, and people set up medical appointments and people don't show up. That's the standard. So they have this. It's everywhere, and they have a system that reminds people 5 days before and 3 days before They get a text message, hey, don't forget, you have this appointment. But even with those reminders, the no-show-up rate is about 22%. And by the way, you get a text message, you could say, I'm not showing up. Like, saying you're not showing up is great. The worst is that you don't show up and you don't say it. That's 22%. So we looked at it and we said, look, the text message is assuming that the problem is memory. People just forget. Maybe we can add motivation. So again, imagine I asked you, what kind of motivation? The only thing, we can't add money or anything in this case. The only thing we have is to work with text message. So we can only change the text. That's our constraint. What kind of things would you try? No, that's, we're constrained to this right now. Keep getting text. What motivation can we add? No. Don't. I said we can't do anything else. It's only text. Okay. Okay. Think in advance. Okay. What else?
Taking a spot away from somebody else.
Oh, very good. What else?
Enter them in a contest.
Contest. So, look, there's lots of ideas, right? I mean, we said motivation is complex because you can give money, you can take money, you can do contests. There's a lot of things to do. We are constrained now just to the text. So we said, what can we do in the text? We could say your doctor is waiting for you and give the name of the doctor, maybe the obligation to the doctor. We can say the nurse is waiting for you and give the name of the nurse. We could say your kids really want you to be healthy. We could say the HMO is going to lose 200 shekels if you don't show up. We could say another patient could use the appointment if you don't do it. Anyway, we tried lots of versions. The one that won was another patient could use your spot if you don't use it. It reduces the no-show rate to between 13 and 14%. So from 22 to between 13 and 14%. By the way, as in Israel, it was a very nice news, right? That people cared. The most thing they care about is somebody else in the thing. It was a little bit disappointing they didn't care about the HMO, losing money. But we did, by the way, after that, we did like a big data analysis because we did this on slightly more than 100,000 people. But, you know, different people are different. So we said, we got it down to, let's say, 12%. We said, could we do it better if we tailored a message for each person? Like we took people who are chronic no-shows and men and women and different illnesses, and we did kind of a big data exercise, and we could reduce it by 2% more with that. So first approximation, the same message to everybody is good, but then you could get a little bit more out of it if you try to understand the individual characteristics of this. And here again, the question is, you know, can we add more motivation to do this? And of course, there's many other ways to think about how we add more motivation. So let me tell you what I think is the point of all of this. You know, if you think about what should we as a society be very, very proud of, there's no question that over the last 200 or 300 years, we've made tremendous advances in improving our physical environment. Right? It used to be that Superman was all capable and we were not, and then we built planes and now we could fly, and we built cars and now we can get very fast, and we have amazing halls, and we have stairs and chairs. And think about your chair. Somebody worked very hard to figure out what is the ratio of cushion that we need. Like our bum cheek is a little bit too, not soft enough. So we take every one of our physical challenges and we build around it. We didn't take people and say, become cold resistant. We built heaters and clothes and all kinds of things like that. We basically created an envelope of technology that takes our fragile body and makes us able to function in this world as if we're Superman. In the process, lots of wonderful things happen, including extending expected life a lot, but life also became much more complex. And I think now we're facing with the question about what are the tools for our mental world. right? So we have tools for our physical world for everything, right? We have things that remind us where our keys are. I mean, it's amazing, right? Every little thing. We have things for that. What about the mental exercises? What about thinking about the long term? What about making decisions about health, about savings, about education? What about those things? To me, it's quite clear that if we assume that people are perfectly rational, they can make all these decisions correctly, that will not work. It's like assuming that people can be cold resistant. Instead, I think we need to build those tools, right? So, and what we're trying to do is kind of taking the first step into those. So instead of giving people phones, cell phones and cars and say just don't text and drive, we need to develop the things that would make people help them and not do the bad behavior at the right at the bad time. and that's a task. And the good news that I think if we can make it, we can improve a lot. You know, we look at the state of the world, and the state of the world is very sad. And you can look at it and you can say, oh, this is the outcome of 8 billion rational people. And this is the best we can get. Or you could say, you know what, this is the consequences of 8 billion irrational people working in a suboptimal system, and there's lots of room for improvements. So on one hand, the behavioral economics perspective is really sad. Right? You get to wake up every morning next to your significant other and say, we're myopic, vindictive, emotional, don't understand everything. I mean, we have all these flaws, right? It's a very sad realization to realize how flawed we are. But then it also has the benefit of saying, but we can do so much better if we just build a better environment. So with this, I will say thank you, and I have a few minutes for questions, comments, concerns, criticism. And I'll repeat the question if you'll say it loud enough.
So the theory you explained about removing friction and adding fuel, it seems simple and elegant. So is behavioral economics from now on just designing experiments in certain domains, applying those theories? If not, then what else is there? You know, what are the breakthrough things? That's one. And the second one is, so we've been at it for 20 years or so, but it still sucks, right? We still eat too much. We don't take medication. So why is it so difficult?
Okay, so you got two questions. Yeah. Okay. So look, behavioral economics has lots of flavors. Let's start with economics. Economics really has two sides to it. Economic has a descriptive side and a prescriptive side. The descriptive side says, I have a theory of human behavior, or human intention, or humanity. That's the descriptive side. The prescriptive side is saying, here is how you create a tax system, or a hospital, or an education system. The people who are looking more at economics as a descriptive study are doing much more theoretical work. Was showing that people are not always transitive, or that they are risk averse. So something that basically only economists care about. The people like me, I've changed over the years. I was much more on that side. I was telling economists, you're wrong, you're wrong, you're wrong. And then I said, I don't care so much that they're wrong. I care more about the things that in the world that I don't like. Right? So think about the continuum between the people who care about economics, let's get economics right, and the people who said, I don't care about economics right, I just want to create systems that work. I'm much more in that camp. I don't think it will be good for universities to have lots of people like me, but some people it's good. Right? So I'm in that camp. And doing all kinds of work to try and improve what we do. So that's one. There's lots of flavors out there. And you could do it through policy, you could do it through business, there's lots of places to do it. The second question is, why are we still not doing much better? Some of the cards are really stacked against us. So think about eating. Donuts are really good. And they're getting better. Like, what do you think? What do you think Donut 2.0 will be? more tempting or less tempting? The behavioral economics perspective is that we walk around the world, and it's what is called choice architecture. Environment matters, and almost every entity around us wants something from us now. So every coffee shop wants you to buy another cookie today, and every app wants you to check that app today. Who in your environment cares about your long-term well-being? You know, if we did, we wouldn't text and drive. I mean, there's no evidence that we care. But you know, in principle, you would say maybe your significant other, maybe your parent, maybe a religion, maybe the government. But the things in your immediate environment mostly have their own benefits, and they want their short-term benefit at your expenses. So you go to the supermarket, and you have a plan, but the supermarket also has a plan. And their plan is not the same as yours, and they control the environment, and who wins?
The supermarket.
Yeah. So what happens is that we created a world with a ton of temptation. I'll give you one last statistic on this. In the US, everybody who passes away, they do an analysis of what they passed away from. And many times it's multiple things. And you can ask these database questions. You can say, what is the percentage of people who died extra early because they made some mistakes? Like, a clear mistake is you drive drunk and you drive into a tree and you kill yourself, right? But you know, smoking, obesity, and so on. And about 100 at the beginning of the last century, when this data started being collected, the percentage was about 10%. It was about the percentage of people who made bad decision and got to die a little earlier or a lot earlier. Bad decision lead to early mortality. And the last time they estimated was 43%. What happened? Are we getting dumber? No, temptation is getting much better, right? Smoking, obesity, diabetes, texting and driving, all of those things are basically about the temptation industry. It's just getting better and better and better. And we need to realize what we're doing, and we need to try and limit it. Let me actually say one more thing about this. We created a little app, a Tamagotchi, a turtle. And the turtle in our app is happy as long as people exercise, take the medication, and eat well. And the turtle becomes less and less happy as long as people don't do it, and until it finally goes back to its shell and it's very unhappy. We tested whether this turtle has much effect on people's behavior. And the answer is a little bit, not much. So then we gave our turtle superpowers. What superpowers? We gave it the ability to delete other apps from people's phones. Yeah. So when we install the turtle analyzes what apps people use more frequently. Those are the first ones to go. And they come back every night, and they get to disappear during the day. And we only give it to people who had heart surgery. So I teach at Duke. We go to people who had heart surgery at our hospital. And we say, look, you just had heart surgery. And you think to yourself that you'll go home and you'll change. That you'll eat better and exercise and take your medication. But we know that it wouldn't work. Right? So let us install this app on your phone. You will never be able to delete this app. Only your doctor could. But this app will delete other apps on your phone and force you to behave better. And almost everybody wants that, and they live longer. We started this 3 years ago. And I'm saying it in a complex way because it's a very aggressive app. It's very paternalistic. It's very aggressive. And it's a question that I keep on debating with. I love human freedom. I want people to be able to choose what they do. If they choose texting and driving, I'm not as happy with it. And if people who had heart surgery decide to go back to eating fried chicken and unhealthy food, I'm not so sure where I fall on this. So one difference between standard economics and behavioral economics is how much agency do you give people and how much constraint you give them. And I don't have a good answer for this. I create a little online calculator that helps me figure out how paternalistic I'm willing to be. So, for example, if people make retirement savings, for example, if you made the wrong decision, you can't do it again. You get to 65, oh, made a mistake. Too late, right? There's no second chance. So if you can't regret it, if there's a symmetry of information, if the cost of the mistakes are big. But I think it's one of the things we need to figure out is how paternalistic are we willing to be?
Is there research that shows that that this works better in most socialist countries where there's no evil choice architect capitalist who's trying to make you eat more donuts?
There's no question about that.
Uh-huh.
There's no question about this, right? So what happened is that, look, if if there were no rules, and then we wanted to make the maximum amount of money possible, what would we sell? Heroin, right? Cocaine. Who said cocaine? But yeah, cocaine, heroin. I mean, that's you give one free sample and you're done. You're good. There's the thing, and I'm not saying sugar and heroin are the same thing, but if you say if you're a supermarket and you try to maximize revenue, would you put tomatoes at the checkout counter or cookies? Right? It's just the emotional path is just easier to just much easier to tackle. Let me end by saying something maybe on religion. There's a guy called Eliyahu Dessler who wrote a couple of books called Letters to Eliyahu, and in one of his thoughts he says, if you sorted all the Jews from the least religious to the most religious, one of the many differences that happens on this range is how many decisions we have to make. Right? If you're very secular, you have to make all your decisions. As you become more and more orthodox, more and more decisions are not up to you. Somebody else is making them, has made them for you. And what he's arguing, and there's some support to it, is that as you move to an environment in which more and more decisions you don't have to make, you actually clear up some cognitive capacity to deal with the other decisions. It's sometimes called depletion, right? If you're being tempted all the time by all the decisions, by the time the evening comes, you have no more energy to deal with those decisions if decisions are being taken for you. So I'm not advocating religion necessarily as a solution for that, but if you think about mechanisms like habits, personal rules, and religion, one of the things they do psychologically is to take some of those decisions out of our life. For example, anybody here is vegetarian? Vegan? Okay. What? Yeah. So, like being vegetarian, for example, you say, I'm not going to consider it. You could say, like, I'm going to be 90% vegetarian. It's not going to work. Right? And you're always going to say, is this the day? Is this the meal? And so on. Making it complete really liberates us and allows us to live in the way that we want. Okay, last question.
Have you done any research on corporations? Because in American society, legally corporations have been given the same rights as individuals in court cases, and so the same sort of agency and function. And so if you stop and think about that, these same corporations that provide some of the temptations, have you studied anything about what would influence them to want to be more green or to make healthier food or to work on marketing it as hard as they market things that maybe aren't so good?
So I told you that from time to time I have an idea that I like that nobody else does, and I do a startup. So for a few years, I have data about how companies treat their employees. And I have this data. It's 800 companies, 800 American companies, from 2006 until today, on 80 different dimensions. And what's a dimension? A dimension is how good is the quality of furniture, or are men and women treated equally, or is the management has high follow-through, all kind of things like that. And I basically tried to figure out what are the things that how companies treat their employees and how employees see the company that predict success in the stock market. And it turns out there are some things that really matter and some things that don't matter. For example, do you think that salary matters or doesn't matter? Salary doesn't matter. Fairness in salary matters a lot. Quality of furniture doesn't matter. I feel the response to the question, I feel that in this company honest mistakes are valued, matters a lot. So anyway, what we're doing is so we created, initially I had a little paper on this, and but then we decided to do a hedge fund. So what we're doing is we're buying companies, we're buying the stock market, companies who are treating their employees well, and we're shorting companies who are treating their employees badly, and we're trying to get people to think about this. Now, just to be clear, there are things that company should do out of moral imperative. Right? Not everything is financial, but the things in our fund are like the first step. The first step is to tell the companies, here are things that are good for you and for the employees, let's do that first. Later on, we'll have other things. And we're trying to get, to pass a law that will force all companies to start publishing data about how they treat their employees. So if you think about it, it's really strange, right? Every CEO stands on the stage and says, my employees are the best thing I have. But then, if you look at yearly reports, if a company buys a warehouse, it's an investment. If they invest in their employees, it's a cost. Right? There's something very strange about that. So we're trying to force companies in their yearly report to start emphasizing human capital as an essence. And there's lots of work to do on this, and we don't exactly understand everything, but if you think about this notion of making things salient and visible, that's still a principle, right? So we're trying to say, we want you to measure. The moment people will start measuring, they will start paying attention. Hopefully we'll start caring more. So with this, I will say thank you for your time, and I appreciate it.